You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Day and night must scramble for a living.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com. And you can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com. And, of course, I will answer as many questions as I can. Or you can always send and check out our webpage at letstalktorah.net. That's letstalktorah.net. And the archives are there. The new shows are there. There's a place for questions and comments. And, of course, the all-important donate button. We have different levels. You want shout-outs. You want mazel tovs. You want anniversaries. Whatever works. Or, as most of you seem to appreciate, the anonymous part, which, of course, works for us just as well. And, of course, I do thank you in advance. And, not that I really understand these things so well, but we are still on that list of top 10 feed spots, 10 best Jewish book podcasts, and we're still at number 3. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do to get up to number 1, but you keep listening, you keep sharing, you keep posting, and I am sure we will get there. When I prepared the show, it was last week, it was so hot. It was unbelievable. And I hope you enjoy the heat. Because, now I happen to, of course, like snow. But for those of you who don't like the cold, well, last week for sure helped you out. You had all the heat you want, nice hot temperatures, watering my lawn, watering the sod, watering the new trees, watching the flowers grow, watching my wife keep switching around all her plants on the porch, whatever it takes. But when I think of snow, so snow, of course, is white, at least where I live, not in Dr. Seuss, but when you think of snow, you think of the color white. And it always reminds me of one of the colors of leprosy. Or in the Torah, it's tsaras. Whether leprosy, tsaras, becomes the physical, starts spiritual, it's only physical, it starts spiritual, and then manifests into become physical, whatever it is. Whatever the tsaras of the Torah is, the main reason it comes is because of slander. In last week's Torah portion, we have Miriam, Moses and Aaron's sister, getting leprosy. And it was supposed to be a lesson. What was the story? The story was that when the new elders are appointed and they go into the tabernacle, into the Mishkan courtyard, and they all start prophesying. So Tzipporah, Moses' wife, is standing next to Miriam. Makes sense. Two sister-in-laws. Makes sense they're standing next to each other. And Tzipporah sort of sighs. And she says, I feel bad for their wives. So Miriam says, like, wow, why? Well, my husband prophesies, and we're not living together anymore. We separated. So Miriam says, well, it does make sense. I've prophesied before in my life. My brother Aaron has prophesied. Let me see what I can do. She goes to brother Aaron to discuss the situation. Now, of course, right, they're just trying to be helpful. Miriam is just trying to help her sister-in-law. She has only good intentions. However, when you're talking about Moses, you need to be smart enough to realize that maybe Moses has some different rules and regulations, which he did, by the way, because since he could talk to God at any time, he couldn't be married. You know, the Torah does not believe in the concept of celibacy. being a monk. Torah does not believe in that at all. The first command is to have children, be married, have children, procreate. That's at the top of the list. So Torah does not believe in not being married. As a matter of fact, in the Talmud we find there were some people that felt they were so connected to Torah that they couldn't stay married. And there's I don't want to call it a punishment, but the rabbis' ways of showing that they were not happy with how they were acting was, we only know their father's name. There's a Ben Azai and a Ben Zoma. Son of Azai, son of Zoma. I believe their first name was Shimon. But it doesn't say their first name. As when they say some statement in the Talmud to make a statement in law and whatever, we don't get their first name. Because the rabbis are showing their displeasure that they're not married. So in the actuality, Miriam is trying to fix things up. She doesn't understand the situation why Moses should be different. So therefore she goes to Brother Aaron. And they start to discuss it. When you're dealing with Moses and not understanding the situation and talking, instead of walking over to Moses and say, what gives, even that can go under the category of slander. So what does God do? He immediately calls Miriam and Aaron to the tabernacle with Moses, and God starts to tell them that Moses is not like anybody else. He's the most humble person ever, and he's the greatest prophet, and he's trusted in all of God's house. And you got to be careful when you talk about Moses. And God leaves the scene, whatever that means, and Miriam is left with tzaras, with this leprosy. Okay, so Aaron speaks to Moses, what should we do? And Moses should pray, say pray, and God says, okay, send her out of the camp for a week, and then after a week, she can come back in. That's her punishment. So remember, here we have Miriam, totally, as we say, l'shem shemayim, totally trying to be helpful, but still made a mistake, and therefore still had to pay for that mistake. And you see how strict God is when it comes to this idea of slander. So what happens in our Torah portion? They didn't get the message. Right here, in this Torah portion, these spies are almost as soon as they leave, 10 out of the 12, not including Yoshua, Joshua, and Kalev, they plan on coming back and slandering the land of Israel. Now, it's interesting. Maybe you didn't know that you could slander a country. Okay, you could. And also part of their conversation, they're basically going to say that God is not strong enough to conquer Israel. So they leave to go spy out the land, but they're really coming back with an intention of slander. So weren't they paying attention? Like, everybody knew that Miriam got tzaras. How did we know everyone knew? Because it seems it was time to leave. It was time to travel. And everybody said, okay, like, we're getting packed up, ready to go. No, we can't leave yet. Why can't we leave? Because Miriam's not in the cloud. Why is she not in the cloud? Okay, so she spoke less than her, she's being punished. Okay, so anytime someone gets punished and they're outside the camp, they stay outside the cloud and they have to travel outside while the rest of us travel. Why are we waiting? And so if they knew the answer, they didn't know the answer. The answer happens to be that because Miriam waited when Moses was born and put into the Nile, put into the river, so she waited to see what God's plans were, so that 20 minutes of waiting was rewarded with a full week of millions of people waiting for Miriam. So everybody knew what was going on. So if everybody knew, and there's a very end last week's Torah portion, so it's not like it's out of their memory. So everybody knew. So what did the spies think? They think God's not gonna go after them for their slander? Like, it's always hard to imagine sometimes where it should be so clear, so obvious that this is a bad idea, and that's people. right? We can make amazing mistakes. Now, these 10 that slandered are all going to die a horrible death, right? They're finished. The problem is God allows them to spy. He allows them to slander. He allows the Jewish people to cry overnight. And then these 10 guys pay for it. But now it's too late. Right? Now you can't back out and say, oh, we're sorry for crying. We're sorry for listening to the slander. Now you're going to pay for it. So we're going to get into the details of that. I saw an interesting story. So Rabbi Jacobson Gustman was a child prodigy in Vilna. One time he said a Torah thought, and somebody repeated that Torah thought to the leader of the Vilna community by the name of Chaim Grzinski, and he was blown away by the answer, because it seems there was a court case going on, and there was a back and forth discussion, and this thought he believed would help convince the court his way of thinking. So he actually had him give it over, and it seems they did change. Now, as a young man, he was serving on the court in Vilna, on the Jewish court, people that were decades older than him. Anyways, but World War II came. He had to escape, and he made his way to Israel. He opened a yeshiva called Netzach Yisrael. But interesting enough, on Thursday afternoons, he gave a public speech, a lot of it based around law and Torah thought, and it was attended by like who's who of academia. It was like brilliant people, not Torah scholars, not religious people. I mean, religious people and also rabbis, scholars. But it was you could have judges there, you could have professors. It was a packed house, and it was every Thursday afternoon. One of those professors, by the name of Robert Aumann, really. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. He's actually related to me, sort of. Cousin's brother. Anyways, so this Robert Aumann, his son Shlomo, was in the IDF. And in 1982, this Shlomo was killed in battle. Now, it happened to me that this Dr. Aumann always went Thursday afternoons to hear this Rabbi Gustman. So Gustman went to the cemetery. He went to the funeral. He went to the cemetery, and he was just looking around. It was he saw all the soldiers that had been killed and buried, and interesting enough, he went to be Menachem Abel. He went to the shiva of this Dr. Aumann, and he said the following. He says, in World War II, when I was trying to escape, so I was caught, and my son, whose name was Meir, was taken from me and killed. And he is holy, because he was killed just because he was Jewish. But he didn't die saving anyone's son. He was just killed because he was Jewish. But your son was killed because he was not only Jewish, but he was saving people. And I bet that my son and your son are having a conversation in heaven right now. And then he says, because I was trying to escape and run for my life during World War II, I actually never got to sit Shiva for my son. Would you mind if I sat on the floor next to you and we can both sit together for our children? Whoa. Dr. Oman, of course, said, you've comforted me. And when I read that story, it just leads me to think what's going on today. The world we keep talking about, the world has just totally lost its mind. Totally lost its mind. I was talking to somebody last night. So you could go save hostages, and it's your fault that you went to save hostages that people got killed. Like, no one told you to hold the hostages, right? Like what? Like everybody starts shooting at them, so we shoot back? Like just the way the world is looking at the whole situation. If you just took the situation and wrote the whole story and just don't say who's Jewish, who's Arab, who's religious, who's not religious, I think people would look at it and just with a total different mindset. So, but that is what's going on today, right? You're Jewish, you're on campus, they can fight with you and yell at you and interrupt your classes and interrupt your graduation and not let you go to class and beat you up because you're Jewish. And it's scary. Too many people are staying in Germany in the 30s. Same things were going on. Crazy things were going on. So the world right now is just going nuts. And we can only hope and pray that just everyone will get back to whatever normal means, but at least something. And it's a tragedy what we're going through now. Today, right now, we are in a time of definite tragedy. And we need to remember that all our tragedies really go back to the destruction of the temple. Everything, when we look at globally, all the tragedies that happened, everything really goes back to the destruction. It really goes back to the destruction of the first temple. Because the second temple was just a continuation of the first one, which was destroyed, and they knew it was going to be destroyed as well. And that's really, and to take it even further back, the destruction of the temple goes back to the story of the spies. So let's go through the spies a little bit, just to make sure we hit on this point. So the spy, actually I just want to do the end part. I don't want to lose out. Maybe the next show we'll get to the whole story. So the spies come back and they report that the land of Israel, a crazy country, the people there are giants, and we're not going to be able to conquer it, and they're in fortified cities, and the people are strong. Like all the details that Moses said to them that they should be paying attention to see if it's strong or weak, and all the signs he gave them, they ignored everything Moses said, and they came back and they made up their own story. Why they would think that it's too strong for God to conquer? Like, why should they think that? And it wasn't even what they were sent for. Right? Officially, there was people were asking, bring us to this land. We don't know anything about this land. We don't know anything about it. Is it good? What's the food like? What's the water situation like? What's the weather like? What kind of land is it? Why would they think? Right? It's hard to imagine. Right? You just finished 10 plagues. Like, God just killed all the firstborn in a second. You just had the splitting of the Red Sea. You just wiped out the Egyptian army, the most powerful army in the world. You received the Torah a year ago. You've seen all these miracles. Now, all of a sudden, you think God can't take care of you? Like, what are you thinking? You want to know, where's God bringing me? I hope he's not bringing me to a desert. I hope he's not bringing me to Antarctica. I hope he's not bringing me to some crazy place where the land is all dried out and there's no water supplies. Or, okay, maybe I can understand that. But where's the thinking that, like, the spies come back with a story? It's God can't do it. God's not strong enough. Like, why? So there's giants there. So what? Like, I don't even really understand exactly what people were thinking. But they come back, and everybody cries. Right? Like, it's almost like they wanted to believe the spies. Like why? And we always mention on this part, I tell my class all the time, you should always be careful what you ask for. You might get exactly what you asked for. Sure enough, the Jewish people are crying, we don't want to go to Israel, it's crazy, crazy land, we'll get killed, why are you bringing us? God says, no problem. You don't want to go? You don't have to go. You're going to stay in the desert for 40 years. When your whole generation is dead, I'll bring your kids in, and hopefully they'll have a better idea of how they're supposed to listen to me. We're getting food from God and water from God. The clouds are protecting us. But God's not strong enough. Like what? The whole thing doesn't make any sense, right? So it says the Jewish people cried that night. They cried. So God says, you cried for no reason. There was no reason for you to cry. Parents do this sometimes, right? Right? You tell your kid, this is what you're crying for. Huh, I'll give you something to cry about. So we're busy crying for no reason. So God says, you're crying for no reason? I'm going to give you a reason to cry. This night will now be a night in history that the Jewish people cry. The first temple was destroyed on this night, it's Tisha B'Av. The second temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av. There's multiple things throughout history that happen on this auspicious, if you like to call it that, on this auspicious day. So it's interesting. There was a kibbutznik, right? So he lives on a kibbutz. If you're not familiar, certainly in the early times, they were not just liberal left, the kibbutzim. They were like for the most part, they were anti-Jewish, right? Anti-God. Nothing to do with Jewish. Don't even know why they're Jewish. Don't learn anything about being Jewish. They know they're Jewish and there's a land, but what exactly is being Jewish and loving Israel if you have nothing, no belief in God, no belief in the Torah? Like, so what exactly is the land of Israel for? Like, why? Go to Uganda. Because your relatives live there, but you don't believe in anything they believed in. But okay. So this kibbutznik says to someone, he says, I don't need to cry over the destruction of the temple. I have Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah. And that's good enough for me. That alone, I can go ahead and cry on that day. So the person says, how are you going to make sure that, you're crying over the Holocaust Memorial Day, but how do your future generations are going to cry over it? What do you mean? I'm going to explain to my children what happened, what the world tried to do to us, what the world did do to us, and they're going to understand how terrible that day was or that time period was, and they'll tell their children, and they'll tell their children. And that's why I only want to believe in the Holocaust Memorial Day. So the person says, I don't understand you. We've been doing this for 2,000 years. For 2,000 years, we've been crying over the temple and all the tragedies that came because of the destruction of the temple. We have experience doing this. We have successfully gone ahead and cried over the destruction of the temple for 2,000 plus years. Why are you trying to start a new trend? What are you trying to accomplish? It's all coming from the same place. It's all the exile the Jewish people are in. We've gone from one exile to the next exile, but it all comes from the destruction of the temple. But even that has its basis all the way back when we cried, when we heard the false report from the spies, right? And sometimes people tell us things that just sound horrific. And people's first reaction to horrific is, this is terrible, we have to do something about this. And they don't even have the details of the story. And when you get the details of the story, all of a sudden you find out like you're crying for the wrong reason. So that's really what's going on in this week's Torah portion, right? The spies went to Israel. They went with a plan to slander. They didn't learn about slander from Miriam. They slander. The Jewish people cry. That leads to them being stuck in the desert for 40 years, dying in the desert. Their children going into Israel without them, not recognizing how God was taking care of them, which eventually leads to the destruction of the first temple, which leads to the destruction of the second temple, which even leads to the destruction of the Holocaust as well. So, okay, now I'm going to backtrack because now I say I have a few more minutes. So let's go back. We're not going to finish it now. We'll finish it later. But so Moses says to the Jewish people, you can send spies. Why did Moses give in to the spy business? Like, why? God told him he's going to Israel. He trusts in God. What's the big deal? So God says to Moses, you can send for yourself spies. So we're missing part of the conversation. Something happened over here. God's not just sending spies and then warning us that it's a bad idea. So it happens like this. The Jewish people come to Moses and they say, what's with this land? We don't know anything about this land. you gotta give us some info. And we're going to get back into this in the next show because clearly the music is playing and we don't got time. I hope you enjoyed it. Short and sweet. Thank you, of course, to all wonderful sponsor listeners. You know I can't do it without you. Thank you to our production team. We have Alan in the back today. I hope I've left you some food for thought. Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. Until next time, don't forget to think about it.
A million dreams for the world we're gonna make. There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things.
You may ask, tradition, get started. Because of our traditions. Every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff at letstalktorah@gmail.com. And, of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or you can go to our webpage, letstalktorah.net. That's letstalktorah.net. The old shows, the new shows, questions, comments, and, of course, the all-important donate button, which you press. And when you press that button, that's not enough, of course. You then have to fill out a credit card. But when you can help us with a donation to help the show continue to grow so we can continue to spread what we do, that is just amazing and truly appreciated. And as we've been mentioning the last few weeks, we are in the top 10 in FeedSpot's 10 best Jewish book podcasts. And we are still at number 3. So clearly we need to share, post, talk about the show to a few more people because we need to move up in our ratings because, like, why not, right? Anyways. So school is out. Here we are at the end of June. So some of you, of course, finished school probably a week ago. But here in Detroit, we finished yesterday. Great end of school. We had great trips, great time. Kids were amazing. I told my class to end off the year, I said, you guys should be really proud. You all grew. You worked each on your own level, but we saw so much growth from you. You should be proud for everything that you did. And hopefully they were. I know one boy told his mother, this is a boy that had to go to medicine, and he told his mother, I can't wait for my report card. I know that I did way better, and I'm really proud. He said this before I told them to be proud, and he should be proud. He worked hard. He grew a lot. He has a long way to go. I don't have to tell him that part, but he's working. He's, as we say, steiging. It's, there's nothing like going through a year. And as a teacher as well, as a student, but as a teacher, to look back and say, you know what? This class really, really was amazing. And when they walked through the door, the beginning of the year, there were many in this class that had all kinds of different challenges. Even when I would talk to the principal, like the bottom 5, he didn't want to talk to me about. Like, I said, we're not discussing those 5. That's a whole different conversation. I mean, the rest of the class, where are they up to? And I can't remember if I told you guys. I sat down with my principal a month ago to go through the report cards, and we decided that the class really, really improved, and we don't have to split them, which is just amazing and really fantastic. Talking about children. So in last week's Torah portion about Loscha, we talk about Aaron lighting the menorah. And its juxtaposition is fascinating. The end of Parashas Naso, we have each prince of each tribe brings a special inauguration sacrifice for the opening of the tabernacle. Now, the 12 tribes in this case, does not include Levi. Instead, Joseph is broken up into two. He's Ephraim and Manasseh, and Levi, they're the honor guard, they're their own tribe, but he's not included in bringing a sacrifice. So he felt bad. Every tribe gets to bring an inauguration sacrifice, and it was like very specific. And we do nothing. So God says, Aaron, don't feel bad. I have something very special for you. You are going to light the menorah every day. The candelabra, that golden candelabra with 7 lamps on it, you're going to light that every day. So your inauguration is not a one-time deal. It's every day. It's every day. And I don't remember where this went. And fine. Now, first things first is that the idea is that it's not a one-time deal, is in it of itself a fantastic lesson. What's that lesson? That the menorah represents teaching, and it's an everyday, right? You have a school year, right? Every day. And maybe every day I do the same thing. Every day I walk in, I teach the next verse, I teach a Rashi, I teach a Mishnah, I teach grammar, I tell stories, I give lessons. Every day. Every day. It's a constant. Part of teaching, they say in for successful business people, part of being successful is showing up. In teaching, being successful is not showing up. In teaching, it's being steady every day. Let's keep going. I'm not saying we don't change it up to make things exciting. Of course, we do different things to make it exciting. But there's a certain expectation. They know what's happening today. They know what's happening tomorrow. They know what happened yesterday. We're doing the same stuff. We're going on. We're learning the next verse, and the next verse, and the next chapter, and the next commentary, and the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah, and the next part of the grammar, and the next Torah study, and the next Torah portion. Every day, over, continuous. That's part of what education is about. It's not just showing up. You got to teach them, right? You got to have the skills to teach them, and you have to have ways of making life exciting for them. So Moshe explains, by the way, interesting, there's 2 ways to teach. You can help the student move along. I could feed you all the answers, which I do a lot, by the way. I can make you feel good about yourself. I can move you along, right? But really, it's almost like I'm a crutch, right? Because every day, I'm just helping you keep going. Or I can uplift you. What does that mean? It seems scientifically that if you hold a candle above the wick, now I can't tell you exactly how far above the wick. Obviously, 6 inches above the wick, it's not going to help. But if you're close to the wick, but not actually touching the wick, but you're on top, the wick will actually ignite on its own. And really, that's what we should be thinking about when we teach children. Yes, I can feed you the answers. I can help you along. And yes, I do reports for my daughter. It's true. But if I give you the tools, if I teach you how to fish, right? I give you the tools. I give you in my case, give them the grammar and the way of thinking and the skills of reading and the attack skills. If I give you the skills, now I'm not saying it comes overnight, right? It's a process. But as I give you the skills, you can study yourself. You can learn yourself. You can grow yourself. That is the greatest gift any teacher could give, which is a major focus, I hope, by many teachers. Obviously, each grade level, on their level, but we continuously build on the past skills, and as the child grows, he could do it himself. he can figure it out himself. And I do this all the time with him. I say, you could figure this out. What do you need me for? And then I'll make fun. I'll say, well, if you could answer this question, I'm in trouble because then the principal won't need me anymore. But, right? So it's a game, but they get the feeling you're entitled to think, you're entitled to figure it out, and you're entitled to use skills that you already have to continue growing. It's also interesting. I thought I left myself a note, but for some reason I'm not finding it. There's something else that's a beautiful thought. Oh, I know. I heard somebody say this week. I didn't write it down. But a beautiful thought. And that is that unlike the Nesiim, the princes, they each brought cows and sheep and goats and flour and spices and gold spoon and silver bowls and wagons. It's a big show, right? And sometimes we believe that the only way we can accomplish is if we do something outstanding, something special, something awe-inspiring. Otherwise, you run of the mill every day, no big deal. What's Aaron's job? Aaron's job is almost like the shamish in the shul. Turns on the lights, makes sure the heating is working, the air conditioning is working. It doesn't seem to have everybody got to bring these big, amazing inauguration sacrifices, and you light the menorah. You turn on the lights, right? So it's easy to imagine that Aaron can look at that and say, that's it. And the answer is, that's not it. The answer is, even what you might consider small, what you might consider unimportant to the world, but is massively important. The parent coming home, talking to his kids, just being there. That's an example of just, being there, right? It doesn't have to be the big things. Appreciating what your wife made for supper, appreciating the things were cleaned up, appreciating what people do for you. Even the small stuff, especially with children. It doesn't have to be big things. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Even the small stuff, every day, constantly, boosting their confidence, helping them out, doing their homework with them, talking to them, saying good morning. Even the little stuff done constantly is so powerful that maybe is the lesson that God is telling Aaron, your job is greater than this. They did a one-time big deal. They did a one-time big thing. You, Aaron, are going to be showing people that the every day, doing the same, that's lighting the menorah every day, that little, what you consider a little action, but every day is fantastically powerful. And that really becomes, for multiple reasons, a great lesson to look at the menorah and talk about children at the end of the school year. And of course, hopefully, all our children will have a healthy summer and they'll grow. There's what to be said to be bored as well. That's also part of a child's growth, finding things to do, using their imagination. But hopefully all the children had an amazing school year. And now hopefully they'll have a safe summer and play a little baseball, play a little soccer, run around. I don't know, whatever kids like to do. So we started in the last show talking about the beginning of this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is Shalach, where Moses is sending the spies. Now, what happens like this? The people come to Moses and say, what's with this land of Israel business? Like, what gives? You keep telling us about this land. You tell us a great land. How do we know? Have you ever seen it? We've never seen it. We've been slaves in Egypt forever. We don't know anything. So Moses, but God said it's going to be great. Yeah, of course God said it's going to be great. But how do we know? We want to send spies. So it's like the car dealer. Now, I'm not suggesting you do this, right? But he goes to the car dealer, can I test drive your car? Can I bring it to the mechanic? Can I take it home for a few days? And everything you say to the car dealer, he says yes. So you're already pretty comfortable. If, on the other hand, you say to the car dealer, can I bring it to my mechanic? No. Can I take it for a test drive? 5 minutes, I'll sit in the car with you. But we're only going around the block. The less giving the car dealership is, the more nervous you become. The more the car dealer says to you, do whatever you want, no problem. You want to take it for a few days, take it on a trip, no problem, go fishing. Okay, probably the car dealer is not worried about anything. It's probably fine. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying that you're not as concerned when the car dealer says go for it. So too Moses felt, if I tell them they can't send spies, they're going to be nervous. Better I tell them yes to everything. And he was hoping that they would say, oh, if Moses is letting us do whatever we want, probably it's fine. But unfortunately, they wanted spies. So God says to Moses, Shlach l'cha anoshim, send for yourself men. Meaning you're sending. God gave him permission. I don't think it's a good idea. But if you want, you can send. Now, it says from here, they explain that Moses is also responsible for the tragedy that takes place, right? We discussed in the last show. The spies will go. They'll come back with a bad report. The Jewish people will cry. They're now stuck in the desert for the next 38 and a half years till this generation passes away. So this is a pretty disastrous event. So the question is, like, what did Moses do wrong? Right? We say he's responsible, but what did he do wrong that he's considered responsible for the spies? What are we supposed to do? So the Abarbanel is very, very interesting. God says to Moses, send spies. Moses should have taken 12 people and said to them, okay, guys, God says you can go as spies. Go spy, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Instead, Moses gives a lot of instruction. If you see walled cities, it means that people are afraid of invading armies. If you see open cities, they think they're strong. Are there trees there? Are there people that will protect them? What kind of cities are there? He gives them a lot of stuff. He put a lot of questions in their head. And when you put questions in a person's head, you change their whole outlook. I mean, it happens to all of us all the time, right? Somebody says to you, are you sure? Are you sure? As soon as you say to me, are you sure? No, I'm not sure anymore. I was 5 minutes ago, but as soon as you say to me, are you sure? I'm not sure anymore. Now you got me thinking, even though I had nothing to think about. But if you keep asking me, are you sure? So you're putting doubts in my head. You put doubts in my head, I have doubts. So there's a story that said the Guru Rebbe. A man came to him, two men came, and they both wanted to invest in wheat. The first man goes into his office, I'm a businessman, should I invest in wheat? And he said no. So the guy leaves, doesn't invest in wheat. Second guy comes in, and he says, with the times and the wars and the traveling and the weather, this is the perfect time to invest in wheat, because if you invest in wheat now, you can buy it cheap, but in 6 months from now, that wheat's going to quadruple in price. A great idea. Should I invest in wheat? So the Rebbe told him, yeah. And the man went to invest in wheat, and it was a disaster. So the second man comes back to his Rebbe, and he said, I don't understand. The first guy you told, don't invest in wheat. To me, you said, yes, invest in wheat. If you told the first guy no, why didn't you tell me no? He says, I'll tell you the problem. People come to me, ask me questions, and God sends me ideas in my head. Whatever I think, I blame on God. God puts ideas in my head, and I give the answer. So the first guy came to me. He asked me a straight question, and I said, no, must be God put in my head, it's a bad idea. The problem was you walked into my office, and instead of God putting ideas in my head, you were putting ideas in my head. You were telling me why wheat's such a good thing. Instead of trusting me that God will give me a good idea what to tell you, you basically put the whole answer in my head. You put the whole answer in my head, so what do you want for my life? So the Barbanel says that's what happens over here. That's what happens over here when Moses is sending the spies. He sends the spies, and as we say, the rest is history. And you want to know that history, check out the show before, because we spent a lot of time on it. But I did want to give myself a few minutes. The end of this week's Torah portion is a very interesting mitzvah. It is the mitzvah of tzitzis. Tzitzis are those strings. You see me walking around, you'll see there's strings hanging outside of my pants, right, above my belt. I'm wearing a four-cornered garment under my shirt, and on each corner there's there's really four strings that are slipped through a hole. So now there's 8 strings. There's a set of 5 knots, and in between the knots there's some twisted strings, and then there's 8 strings hanging out. That's basically what tzitzis looks like. And in the time of the temple, they also had one of the strings was blue or bluish. It was called tcheles, and that color was lost. Over time, people have claimed that they've discovered the color. Some people wear the blue color now. Others said that since we lost it, we don't look for it anymore. And that's a discussion amongst the rabbis. But in this paragraph that talks about wearing the tzitzis, it also talks about that you shouldn't follow your heart and you shouldn't follow your eyes. Right? You don't follow your heart, you don't follow your eyes, because those lead to sin. Happens to be that this is one of what's called the sheish mitzvahs tamidiyos. It means 6 constant mitzvahs. There are certain mitzvahs that you could technically do 24/7. 24/7. I can believe in God all day long. I can believe in God all night long. I can be careful what I think about. I can be careful what I say. I can do that all day long. The problem is that this is one of those things that's very, very hard. It's in your face, right? You can't walk down the street, especially now in the hot summer, where people forget to wear their clothes, and the billboards and everything else that's out there. When all this immorality is in your face, what do? So the Ar Sameach explains fascinating. He says, I think he's bringing a verse, that an impure heart is strengthened on an empty heart. The verse is like this. If you fill your heart with Torah wisdom, there's no room for impure thoughts. He says, for example, imagine a king is traveling in a desert. He shows up, he finds this palace in the middle of the desert, and no one's home. Well, he just moves in with his soldiers, locks the front door, and he's taken over. That's what our evil inclination does. If he finds our heart is empty of Torah wisdom, so it's open for other stuff. If it's open for other stuff, he moves in. You don't want him to move in? Study some Torah. Get some wisdom in there, and that by itself is a great way to counteract all that garbage that's out there in the street. Talking about tzitzis, so the story is told. There was a man by the name of Phil Harris. Phil Harris was born in 1915. And he was born in Pennsylvania. He grew up to be a community leader in Scranton. He actually died in 1991. In 1948, there was a train crash. And because of the train crash, he lost his legs. So after they came to the crash, and ambulances and whatever, and they brought him to the hospital. And he had already lost a lot of blood. He was going in and out of consciousness. And the nurse who was taking care of him, when the doctor walked in, the nurse said, "Doctor, don't bother. He's a goner. Don't waste your time. You do surgeries over here. Total waste of time. Total waste of time. Don't bother." A little while later, the doctor comes back. He does surgery, and he saves his life. So when he was recuperating, this Phil Harris says to the doctor, he says, I know the nurse told you not to come back, that I was a goner. Why'd you come back? So the doctor says, I saw, you had your pile of clothes. They piled up all your clothes on a chair in the room over here. And on top of the chair, on top of the clothes, I saw those strings, what we've been talking about, the tzitzis. And my grandfather wore those. And I decided that, if you're my grandfather had those strings, and you're a man that's still wearing those strings, you're probably worth saving. So I did surgery, and you're alive. So you're alive because of those strings. That garment, those tzitzis, protected you. So this Phil Harris would tell all the teachers in school that when you teach the Torah portion of Shalach and you talk about the tzitzis, you make sure you tell them this story. Let all those children know that tzitzis protects. Now, it's true. We don't do mitzvos because we plan on being protected. That's not the reason. We do commands because God tells us to do commands. Otherwise, you're only running around doing mitzvahs because you think this one protects and this one makes me wealthy, and we call those skulos, right? And everything does something for me, that's why I'm doing stuff. That's not why I'm doing stuff. Keeping kosher, it's healthy eating. That's not why we're doing God's commands. I'm doing God's commands because God said, this is what I want you to do. It is true that there's a side benefit that mitzvos also accomplish other things for us, even in this world. And the tzitzis happens to be that it happens to protect us. It's not the reason why I'm wearing the tzitzis, but that is what the tzitzis accomplishes. Also, just in case you weren't familiar, right? We say this paragraph. It's the third paragraph of the Shema. So we say it every morning. We say it every evening. And the end is a lot of stuff. There's like 6 commands that are actually wrapped up in this paragraph of the tzitzis, even though, again, we look at it, the main thing is telling us to wear the tzitzis on a 4-corner garment. It's interesting. It's a man command. It's not a woman's command. There is a Yeshivas ben Uziel. When he talks about, there's a verse later in Dvarim that says that there's certain commands for men, and some of those commands don't apply to women. So one of the commands is that a man doesn't wear ladies' clothing, ladies wear man's clothing. What's called man's clothing? So the verse seems to say it's like armor. But the Yeshivas ben Uziel says, no, it's tzitzis and tefillin, which is interesting, but the music is playing, and I hope you enjoyed it, short and sweet. Thank you, of course, to all wonderful sponsor listeners. I can't do it without you. Thank you to our wonderful production team. We have Alan in the back today. And we have left you some food for thought. Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. Until next time, don't forget to think about it.
There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things I compile, each one there